welcome to the second episode of Kasey Talks Critters. This is a show that I want to bring you once a month where I sit down with animal professionals and we discuss a species in particular. Today we're going to talk about crested geckos with my friend Maddie Smith. She is amazing. She's a YouTuber, she is a crested gecko breeder, and she's actually one of the Zen gurus. So for those who are not familiar, we call our customer service representatives gurus. So when you chat with a customer service or guru rep on our website, you are actually talking to a real person. It is not a robot. And we have people live 8 a.m. to midnight every single day. So any questions you have, just go to zenhabitats.com and just click on that little chat notification. So the first thing I want to talk to Maddie about is, why do you think Cresties are so cool?
I think crested geckos are awesome because they're great for beginners up to advanced keepers. You can make their care as basic or as enriched as you choose to, and they will thrive even with pretty basic stuff. So if you're a beginner and you're just starting out, you're afraid to dive into doing bioactive or experimenting with lights and heating gradient, they're totally good at typical house temperature, and you can just do plastic plants and everything. And then as you grow as a keeper, you can also grow with their care. So I think that's really special.
That's awesome. Yeah, they are definitely a pet that I think, I don't like to use the term beginner species because that makes it sound like, anything could be easy, but I do think that these are really good for people who are starting out with reptiles. I do love a crested gecko. They're just so cute.
Yes.
So let's hear a little bit about your current job and how did you get here? How did you start working with animals?
So I've actually been in the animal field since I was pretty young. I started with volunteering with an animal rescue when I was, I think, 12, and then I moved on to working for a dog groomer. Then I moved on to being a wildlife rehabilitator in Ohio. I went on to be a vet assistant, and then started with a dog food company, and then started with a different dog food company, and then started getting into breeding reptiles and doing YouTube. And now I'm with Zen Habitats, and I'm still breeding reptiles and doing YouTube.
Nice. Oh, I love it. And I actually didn't know that you also worked with wildlife. I worked in wildlife rehabilitation as well. So that just you just became more of my favorite person than you were before.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, very, as you know, tiring and exhausting. But yeah, very rewarding at the end of the day.
Absolutely. For sure. It's like you said it right. It takes a lot out of you, but it is a very, very rewarding career for sure.
Definitely.
Absolutely. So, I think I'm going to just talk a little bit about my experience with Cresties. So when I started as a vet tech about 8 years ago, Cresties weren't that popular. Bearded dragons were definitely the big reptile pet. But over the years, Cresties have been blowing up. They're such a popular, fun pet. So most of my experience has been in I'd say the last 3 years working with them. More hobbyist style. So I have a personal one at home. I have a couple here at the office that I take care of. I saw some appointments for them. But other than that, I've never done breeding or anything like that. So, when did you first get introduced to Cresties?
So my first introduction to crested geckos was actually when I worked as a vet assistant. So every job that I've had basically up until I was 18 I was kind of grandfathered in because I knew someone. So I worked as a vet tech when I was 15 and 16, which is younger than you should be able to work. I think you're supposed to be 18 to work at PetSmart or any of the affiliated businesses. Mm-hmm. So I worked at the Banfield that was privately owned in our local PetSmart, and we had a crested gecko return because he dropped his tail. And my friend really, really wanted him, but of course you have to be, I think, 18 to adopt one of the animals from PetSmart. And I didn't know any of the front staff because I worked in the vet. And since I had an employee number, they just automatically assumed I was 18 and let me adopt the animal. So I adopted her first crested gecko for her. And that actually started her career of breeding crested geckos herself. So she started before me. So she started vending reptile expos and breeding pretty high-end animals pretty early on. So I was surrounded by that. And then when I moved out of my parents' house and had a little bit more room, that's when I started getting into crested gecko breeding. So that was like about 4 or 5 seasons ago now.
Wow, that's amazing. It's so fun to see everyone's evolution and how they got to where they are. So thank you for sharing that with me. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So I think now we can get sort of into the nitty gritty about crested gecko care, and then we can. I'm going to ask you some questions that were asked from our fans on our social media platforms. So I guess let's go into, why do you think there's so many in captivity?
So I think there's so many in captivity just because they breed in captivity so well. Pretty much anybody can breed crested geckos. Should you necessarily jump right into breeding crested geckos? Maybe not, but they are very, very prolific in captivity. They started out in very small numbers in captivity, so just the fact that now we're producing millions and millions of them a year is ridiculous. And I think unlike, leopard geckos and bearded dragons, you will see some crested geckos in rescue, but it's honestly very surprising how many you find that get snatched off of like places like Craigslist and in rescue very, very quickly. I think they're just a very up and coming pet to have, even though they are still very popular already. It's ridiculous how many people still want them. So I think it's very, you can attribute their high numbers in captivity because they're very prolific and lots of people want them.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful too, because up until what was it, like mid 90s, they thought crested geckos were extinct in the wild, which I think is crazy. So,
yep.
Yeah, very cool. I love it. So, I guess this one you kind of touched on, but it's how tricky are they to establish? And have you found any methods that tend to work to get them acclimated to your home?
Honestly, crested geckos have been one of the easiest animals I've had to establish. Some of them take longer than others, and babies definitely take a little bit longer than adults or well-started animals. I always start my animals in a sterilite tub that is size appropriate. This is just a travel tub, but or for babies. But I always start babies in like a 6-quart with a vent on the front, holes poked down the sides, with paper towel and plants. And they start very, very well in that. I think it makes it very easy for them to find their food, and you can also monitor them super easily, so you can see if they have any issues with their feces or anything and check for parasites. It's also very good to get a vet appointment if you are unfamiliar with reptiles, so that way you can get a professional opinion and get a fecal ran just so you can rule anything out in the beginning. But I think they're very, very easy to establish, especially if you're not immediately putting them into a huge bioactive and being like, go, because sometimes some will adapt to that just fine. Other ones will have a bit harder of a time finding their food in that situation because they're coming from a breeder setup who typically have their animals in sterilite tubs with everything sterile so they can monitor it. And then going right into a bioactive. So as long as you're starting them in a quarantine setup, I found that they're very, very easy to establish.
Yeah, absolutely. I see that you have a friend. I also have my friend Bert. She's got the frog butt with no tail. But nice. Do you want to say hi to that other Cresty? Isn't he real handsome? Too funny. Oh, there we go. Very beautiful, Cresty. Thank you for sharing that information. So I guess my next question for you is, do you think they're going to be even more popular in the future, or do you think we're kind of peaked on their popularity?
I think definitely that they're going to be more popular in the future, especially with the new morphs popping up. Not only is there an interest in them in the United States, there's a huge interest in them in Korea, and also in places like China, and also, of course, over in Europe. So kind of there's a big worldwide interest in them, and there's people importing and exporting constantly. It just seems like the popularity of them is growing and growing, and I think there's still some more growing to do, honestly.
Nice. Awesome. So we'll be seeing Cresties for a while, I'm sure.
Yes, I think so.
Wonderful. I mean, which I'm not mad at because I love them.
Yeah, I do too.
Yes. So what kind of owner, I mean, we kind of touched on this again, but what kind of owner do you think a Cresty would best suit?
I think a crested gecko would benefit lots of different situations. They're great for apartments and also great for houses because, once again, they don't take up very much space even with a pretty decent sized enclosure. I think the biggest thing to keep in mind is that they are heat sensitive. So if you live somewhere that doesn't have great air conditioning, or if you don't have air conditioning and it gets over 80 degrees typically in your house, it might not be the best choice for you because they can go into heat stress very easily if you get over 80 or into mid 80s, ambient temperature, I should say. So I think anybody that has a pretty like temperate climate or air conditioning or ability to keep an enclosure cool is fine having a crested gecko.
Yeah. Oh, awesome. Yeah, I think that's very fair. Um, so then, obviously, so this is a Zen show. Do Zen habitats make an enclosure that's appropriate for crested geckos?
We do. We have our 2x2x2, which is equivalent to I think 60. So that's a great size for them, the 2x2x2. There's also a 2x2x4, which is like mansion material for a crested gecko if you're willing to give. I mean, I can't even imagine how small they would be in there. But if they'll use it, hey, like give it to them. So yeah, the 2x2x2 and the 2x2x4 would be a great option.
I know. I've definitely had dreams of the 2x2x4 and like loading it with plants. Like I know you would never find the gecko, but I like
Yeah.
I think it would be amazing because it'd be this massive like it'd be like real trees for them.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah. All right. So I want to segue into questions from our fans. And I know we're being a little redundant, but one of the top questions is, are they tolerant for beginner errors?
Yes, they're very tolerant for beginner errors. I think the easiest mistake you can make with them is overheating. Getting over, I'd say, I mean, if I get over 82 ambient in the room, I'm hauling up like air conditioner up. Honestly, I'm hauling it up at 80 degrees. 82, I'd get very nervous. So as long as you keep your room pretty temperate, air conditioner, heat will kill them very, very quickly. The other thing that will kill them very, very quickly is drying out too much or being oversaturated. Oversaturation kills babies way faster than drying out, I would say. Just making sure that there's airflow into the enclosure. It's not sitting soaking wet. Humidity does not equal wetness. So having a good dry out period during the day and then bumping the humidity up during the night. Usually I let my enclosures dry out entirely during the day and then I really soak them at night. And having that good wet dry cycle will keep their shedding and their respiratory health in check. So I think the easiest mistakes you can make is overheating or under or oversaturation.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I totally agree with that. It can be very difficult for some keepers to understand the difference between, like you said, wetness and humidity. Oh, look at him pulling your hair. That's
going
so
on a mission.
we're on an adventure. It's okay. I love it. So this goes into that as well. So we have a fan in the UK who mentioned, so the UK is going through a massive heat wave right now, very scary stuff. And she they were wondering, how do you keep them cool? Because right now the UK is about 40 degrees Celsius, which works out to be 104 degrees Fahrenheit, which is something that they're not used to. So what would you suggest for these cresty owners in the UK who are struggling with these high temps right now?
Definitely. So I have an emergency backup air conditioner that kicks on when it gets too hot. I'd recommend, if you don't have that, if you have a fan, to make like kind of an at-home like swamp cooler, put ice and water behind a fan and blow it into the room. Really kick up the fan temperature in there. Keep in mind, when the fan is going, it's going to dry out the enclosure faster, so you're going to need to mist more often, because when there's a lot of dryness, you just really want to keep that enclosure nice and cool. So misting it, I would mist probably 2-3 times a day, especially if the fan is like constantly drying it out. Just try to keep it like lightly misted at all times, so there's constantly a source of water for them to drink. Also, giving them a water bowl is a really good option. Make sure that it's not a ginormous water bowl for a little baby, of course, but give them a size appropriate water dish so they can drink if they want to. Also, what we do, or what we can do if it gets too hot, put a frozen water bottle on the top of the enclosure, so that way there's just like cool air and water going down into the tank as it,
Yes,
melts,
absolutely.
what I'm trying to say. Yes.
Yeah, no.
So yeah, basically fans and cool water. Make sure you're not spritzing it with like freezing cold water, but nice cool water, mists a couple times a day, and a swamp cooler if you are able to make one. I would do that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've also used little like computer, like PC fans on top of my enclosures, just to like kind of create some more airflow. So then when you mist it, it's kind of like blowing the mist through.
Yes.
And I've had luck with that, because like even though we're in New England, it does get hot sometimes. Like today, I think we're at 97 degrees Fahrenheit, so it gets toasty.
That sounds bad. We're only at 91, but it still feels terrible for us.
Yeah, no, I feel that. I'm not made for the heat, for sure.
Yeah.
So I have a couple more questions from our fans. One is there a way to tame an adult who likes to run away?
So you can try to tame an adult that's going to run away. Keep in mind, these animals don't necessarily want to be held. Mine are pretty chill because I handle them from a very small age, and I'm weighing them once a week. And even just weighing them once a week when they're young and having, like, constant interaction with me, cleaning them twice a week is enough to get them like this. But if you have a more jumpy adult, I'll get on my other one and show you.
Oh, great.
So he's a little bit more jumpy. And of course, now he's not going to be a little bit more jumpy.
Oh, that is
what you can do is you can kind of treadmill hand them, and some of them will fly right off your hands because they will be going faster than your hands can move. Yeah. I would just say try to keep them in your hands. Don't put them back in their enclosure until they've stopped running. Some of them will try to poop on you or pee on you to try to get you to drop them. That's just a defense mechanism, and if you put them back immediately, they'll learn that that's okay to do. So as disgusting as it is, just keep them out and keep working with them. They're all going for my hair today.
Yeah.
Thank you. Such an honor. But yeah, I would just say if they are jumpy, which of course he's not going to be now, but just treadmill hand them, hand over hand. Do small handling sessions sort of frequently. I would do like once a day.
Yeah.
To once every couple of days. Would be plenty. But yeah, just get them used to handling. And then honestly, even if you just keep track of your gecko's weight, like weighing them, like I said, like we weigh like once a week, that's just a really good way to do like a small handling session once a week so they really get used to being handled.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's one of my techniques that I try to recommend for people who are like learning to or trying to get their animals acclimated to handling. Weighing is an important tool that we should be doing for growing animals and sick animals and just baseline anyways, but it's really great to use it as a handling opportunity. Absolutely. So this last one is a little interesting, and I want to hear your opinion on it because my vet tech brain goes one way with this. So the question was, can they grow at different rates? They have a 4-month-old Cresty that's only about 4 grams. In my opinion, that sounds like a very, not that they're necessarily doing anything wrong, but maybe there's a nutritional deficiency. But is it also could there be a genetic factor where they just grow smaller?
Yes, 100%. I think genetics play a big role in how fast they're growing. I've noticed a lot of geckos from the pet store, either maybe they're getting a rough start that we're not seeing in terms of nutrition, but also they seem to end up lankier as adults. It also depends on how big a tub that you have them in. If you start babies in smaller tubs, they tend to grow better than if you were to put them right in a big enclosure, in my personal experience. So I would say yes. I can always go and grab some in just a second to show you what I mean, but I do have some, like if you take this for example, this is how old are you? When was 2019? What year is it?
3 years ago.
3 years old? 2, 3? Okay, he's 3 years old. He grew very quickly. He hit 40 grams within his first year. Wow. This guy just turned a year old the other day. You can see the size difference. It's not super big.
Yeah, but
he's, I think, about 33 grams.
Yeah.
So he grew a little bit slower, but still, he will probably reach a larger size than he will. He's kind of a lanky, small male.
Yeah.
And I think he'll be a more, robust male just based on the body type. So definitely, it depends on genetic factors, how you're taking care of them, what you're feeding, for sure. If you feed them bugs, they will grow so much faster than if you just feed them Pangea. So I do bugs twice a week, typically, and then I do Pangea every other day.
Yeah.
And they grow very, very well. I've had some hit 40 grams within their first year, but typically I see about 30 grams a year. But I also have gotten crested geckos from other people, where I have one in the other room actually, that was only, I believe, 8 grams, and he just turned 2 in May, and I got him in the fall. And I was like, this thing is small, but he wasn't eating bugs, and I don't think he was being fed as often as I feed, and I'm not sure about the housing situation and all of those things, but definitely he's put on some pretty decent size. He put on some pretty decent size since I got him, because he got started on bugs. So I think bugs are a very big boost when it comes to growth.
Yeah, no, I do agree with that. I like the Pangea variety that does have the insects in it, but I still provide some live insects, especially for the growing guys, because I just think they just need a little bit extra, a little bit of help.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I try to do bugs 2 times a week for all of my geckos. I think out of the hundred that I've had pass through here, I've had probably about a dozen not take insects, and most of them are adults that have never taken insects.
Oh, yeah.
But what I'll do for those guys is on the days where the other ones will get bugs, I'll actually add a little bit of cricket powder and a little bit of extra calcium to their food to help them get like a little bit of extra insect protein. And we do the Pangea varieties that have insects, and we do growth and breeder. But still, just a little bit of extra insect powder is what we do to try to help give them a little bit of extra, especially the laying females you want them to have.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's fantastic. Well, I think I went over most of our animal questions. Now I kind of want to ask you stuff about Maddie. So if you were to give advice to someone wanting to pursue a career just like yours, what advice would you give them?
In terms of crested gecko breeding, I would say soak up as much information as you can for at least 1 year before you start making financial decisions for yourself, because you will thank yourself later. It's so easy to jump in and say, oh, I want this, like this is cool. And you're spending, maybe $75 or $100 on a breeder, and that's all you have at the time, but you're just so excited to get started. But you don't really know what the minimum weight is, you don't know how to incubate eggs, you don't know how to take care of babies. And then you are producing these animals that might be a little bit harder to sell because you don't have a name for yourself, and also potentially you're going to lose some hatchlings because you don't know how to take care of them properly. So I would say soak up a lot of information. Facebook is the best and also simultaneously the worst place to find information. So joining Crested Gecko Facebook groups, trying to find a mentor that's been in the hobby for a while. I don't want to say I'm necessarily a mentor, but I have helped a couple of different people, and Shelby, actually. I've talked to them both about Crested Gecko breeding for a while. They came to me for help, and I'm always happy to help people. Okay, Kala, that's fine. I'm always happy to help people, and there's other people in the community that are definitely happy to help and answer questions and anything. If you post on the groups, a lot of people will answer you.
Yeah.
And just like look into the person's reputation before you immediately take it to heart. But yeah, finding a really good mentor is a great way to start, and I think it's very hard to go wrong when you have a reputable mentor that's like guiding you through it. So that's a really good way to start.
I think that's excellent advice, and really like that goes along with pretty much anything. Like mentorships are very beneficial for growth, for personal growth and professional growth. So yeah, I love that. Thank you, Maddie.
Yeah, we have a lot of like contacts in the community that have helped like immensely. We have Noah and Meredith, our friends, who have helped us like so much through everything. Yeah. And even now, like as I know more, it's great because we'll trade animals back and forth and we'll give input, and he has stuff that like I'm like, I want that. I have stuff that now he wants. Yeah. So it's like it's perfect, and it makes like a really good friendship when you start.
Yeah, it's such good community and culture. I love it.
Yes.
Very good. Is there a common myth about your profession that you want to debunk?
No,
it's a tough one.
I guess the biggest thing that I would say, the most common myth, I think, is that people who breed reptiles are hoarders, because I get that a lot, which like is not true. Based on like hoarding definition. Yes, we have a lot of animals, but all of our animals are like very, very well taken care of. If anything were to come up, like we're immediately at the vet. We actually had to get an amputation of one of my gecko's hemipenes, and unfortunately it fell right over Christmas time, so none of the vets were even open. But as soon as the vet was open, we're right down there getting his hemipene amputated. So I think the biggest thing is like to judge a breeder based on what they show you and what they see. If they're showing you filthy enclosures and they're keeping adults in like tiny little tubs, like that's not what you want to go for. You want to go for somebody that is keeping adults with enrichment, and their adults look like healthy. They don't have a bad reputation with selling like sick animals or anything. But yeah, not all breeders are created equally. So I think the biggest thing is to just judge them based on how you would want your animal to be cared for. but also remember that breeders have like a space constraint. So not necessarily having them in like 18 by 18 by 36 enclosures for all of their adults,
Yeah.
but having good enriching enclosures, clean
Yeah.
enclosures for all of their animals.
Absolutely. Oh, that was a good jump. That was a very good one. I like that. um, is what would you say is your biggest challenge that you're facing in your current like projects that you're working on? Is there anything that you find to be a challenge, and how are you tackling it?
So I think the biggest challenge I have is really trying to narrow down like exactly what I want to do. I have a billion different avenues I want to take with my geckos, and it's exciting to see like all these new things and want to like jump into them and do them, but I'm really like trying to laser focus on exactly what I want to do. I do love variety, but I'm trying to figure out what I really want us to be known for.
Deploy the boy.
Yes, in terms of like our geckos and everything. So I think the hardest thing for me, honestly, is just trying to figure out where I want to go with my projects over the next few years. And I do try to plan out a couple years in advance. I have a lot of my pairs planned out for next year, and I have a lot of my geckos that I'm holding back. Well, not a lot of my geckos that I'm holding back, but my hold back geckos that I'm trying to think of their plans for not next year, but the year after. So just really thinking of like a 5-year plan where I want to be and what I want to not necessarily work with in 5 years and where I want our projects to be in the next 5 years. It's kind of daunting, but that's probably my hardest thing.
No, that's fair. And I think that's really important because it's not just about right now. Like you need to like, and because of all the morphs and all the variations, it's sounds very overwhelming. So it makes sense to like pinpoint, okay, like this is what these are the genes we want to look for, etc. And just focus on that. Totally. All right. This one can be about anything. If you were to go back and give your 18-year-old self one piece of advice, what would it be?
Should have thought about this question more. So in my head, I'm still 18.
So, same. It's okay.
It's so hard. It's hard to think. I was like, well, 18 was only a few years ago. And then I was like, oh my God, 18 was like 5 years ago.
Yes. Yeah, we're not going to talk about how long ago it was for me.
I would just say to myself, probably like, stay true to what you want to do. Don't divert off of the path of where you want to go. Because it's so easy to get excited with reptiles and everything. And like just try to take on all these projects. Yeah. So I would just say like, narrow down what you want to do before you do things, basically.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely very good advice. Again, for a multitude of different things. So very good. Yes, I hope for our younger listeners too, that gets you into a mindset. If this is the kind of role that you want to pursue, take the words to heart about try to focus. It's very easy to get excited about all of the different things, and then you get overwhelmed, and then really who ends up suffering is the animals that you can't take care of. So exactly. Yeah, you got to like make sure that you are focusing and spending the time and the energy on what you can actually achieve.
Yes, and burnout very much. I've seen a lot of people who are very new to reptiles get super excited and dive into dozens of different species at one time. And then they're like, I'm overwhelmed, I'm anxious, and this isn't as fun as I thought it would be. And they get burnt out, and then they just get rid of all of their reptiles, and then they're just done. So just take it one step at a time. If you're new to reptiles, start with one species. Really try to like work on perfecting everything you possibly can with that one species. And I think that's just what I would say. By the time I was 18, I've already had reptiles for like 10 years. So I wasn't as new to them at that point. But still, I think everything stands. Just, laser focus on what you want to do and think about a 5-year plan rather than like thinking in the now.
Yeah, I think that's really great advice. So my last question is there one question that you wish that I asked you that I didn't ask, and how would you have answered it?
No, I guess the one thing I could say that's interesting about Crested Geckos is they're great for people that have like a high price range or a low price range. You can find them for very, very cheap. Honestly, I've seen Crested Geckos get sold on like Craigslist for free to like $40.
Yeah.
And I've also seen Crested Geckos get sold for like $30,000 to $40,000. So
yes,
if you've got any money at all, as long as you have the money to take care of the animal, Crested Geckos can potentially be in your budget.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Pretty cool.
Huge price range, and also based on like what level in the hobby you are. Are you just like a beginner hobbyist, or are you like a big full-fledged breeder with like multiple $40,000 Cresties? Like, I want to meet that person. It's not me.
Yes.
But very cool. Oh, Maddie, thank you so much for sitting down with me today. Thank you for showing me two of your beautiful geckos. I know you have many, many more. I think we went over a lot of really great information. I hope this helps our fans who are interested in crested geckos or already have crested geckos. Is there anything else you want to say to our fans?
Get a crested gecko.
Yes. Listen to Maddie. Get a crested gecko. So with that, this is the conclusion of the second episode of Kasey Talks Critters. Make sure you like our YouTube channel, subscribe to our channel, hit the notification bell. We're going to be presenting one episode a month. So if you hit the notification bell, you'll know when it's popping up, and you can be live for our premieres where we'll be chatting in the chat. Yes, we're going to be live chatting during the premiere of this video, so make sure you stick around.